In this video I want to have a look at a theme that's a little bit related to one that we've seen already, which is Capablanca establishing a knight rapidly on an e5 outpost. And that's the theme of Capablanca placing his knights so that they protect each other. What we're seeing is that in an awful lot of games, Capablanca is developing knights on f3 and d2, and then later on they're moving either to e5 and then the other knight moving to f3, or alternatively the knight is moving to c4 and then the other one's moving to e5. It's an interesting theme. I think if any of you have ever read the books of the great Russian trainer Mark Dvoretsky, you'll know that one of his most interesting themes is the theme of the superfluous knight. And actually, it's actually a criticism of this way of placing knights, because what he's saying essentially is that because both knights are aiming for the same square, they're not actually being that effective. They're only being half as effective as they could be. But somehow Capablanca is really looking to place his knights in this way. I want to have a look at a few examples, and you'll see how effective it worked out for him. This first example is from a game from 1919, and it features an opening variation which he played an awful lot. And the idea is it's Queen's Gambit declined, where he's putting the knight on d2. That means that after d takes c4, the knight can recapture on c4, rather than the white bishop capturing on c4, which is normally the case. As we see, the knights on d2 and f3 are protecting each other. The knight comes to c4, and then a little bit later Capablanca places knight to e5, and the knights are once again linked. In our next example, we're going to have a look at a very famous game, a game of Capablanca against Alekhine in 1913. Well, at that stage Alekhine wasn't so amazingly strong. The game is actually famous for another positional manoeuvre that Capablanca carried out. But here once again we're seeing knights being placed in positions where they protect each other. What's also interesting just in the next few moves is Capablanca uses the dynamic power of these knights really to extract a few extra concessions from black. So for example, he plays knight g5, forcing black to weaken his kingside, so that the bishop then has got an entry point on the kingside dark squares. The next example is very, very interesting. Actually, Capablanca played two games in this opening variation, and in both cases he ends up using linked knights very, very effectively. The first game that we're going to have a look at is from 1929, and it's a game against the English player Sargent. Just a not particularly amazingly well played Queen's Gambit declined. And in this position Capablanca played a very interesting non-standard decision. He took on e4 with a bishop, and then went for this ending. A few more moves, and we have our linked knights, d4 and e2. And now, see what happens. Capablanca moves his linked knights up the board and brings the knight into d4. Now these are very strong knights, and certainly coupled with this bishop on g5 pinning the knight on f6, it's a pretty impressive position. Now take a look at his game from 1913 against the strong player Richard Teichmann. Once again we see something pretty similar happening. White allowing black to exchange off his light squared bishop for a knight. Now I think you can see it coming. The knights are linked d4 e2. Now in this particular case Capablanca exchanges a knight before he can link them, but you sort of see the knights linked in death as well as in life, because the other knight comes to d4 and is trying to get to the same square that the other knight had come to. In this case Teichmann played g6 to stop knight f5, but after f3 he was in awful trouble because he couldn't get rid of this pin of the knight on f6. Again, very striking manoeuvres in two separate games. This next game is very nice. We see Capablanca again moving his linked knights up the board. So d2 f3. Then we're getting e5 f3. And a little bit further on, we're getting c6 and e5. So the linked knights have moved up the board from d2 to f3 to e5 to f3 to c6 and e5. Very, very funny theme. Again, interesting game against Frank Marshall. Frank Marshall didn't play the opening that well, having to use tactics to cover his pawn on c7, ending up with a rather offside knight on a6. Taking with c5, he was obviously afraid if he took with a knight on c5 that b4 would follow. And now we see Capablanca again moving his linked knights up the board, c4 and knight e5. Once again using these knights as a way of establishing his knight on e5, that stratagem that he was obviously very, very fond of. Another example from 1927, a famous example against Widmer. I found it quite funny because it's Capablanca gets his linked knights, d2 f3, of course, very standard for the Ruy Lopez. And then by moving his knights up the board, he actually gets to place quite a nice little combination here. Knight moves to c4, and after a5, knight takes e5. And after this move, white gains back the piece, and actually black's in awful trouble because his queenside dark squares, in particular that pawn on c5, is really, really weak. Our final example is against an English player, Theodore Tyler, and this is also a very nice example. Capablanca again linking his knights, and then a little bit further up the board, e5 f3. In the course of manoeuvring, he gets chased away. His knight occupies another outpost, but at the end of the day, all is well, and the knights get linked again. And here you see the dynamic potential of these knights. Knights now on e5 and g5, just tearing black's position apart. So very interesting theme. It's not one that I've noticed in any other player. The way Capablanca brings it off, it's just very, very effective. So that's definitely one theme I'll be looking out for in my own games in the future.